The Attorney General of Venezuela, Tarek William Saab, offered statements on cases of attacks on the stability of the country which had been prosecuted. In Colombia, the coffin carrying the remains of Senator Piedad Cordoba arrived in Bogotá, where the Congress paid her a tribute. In Palestine, the death toll of civilians from the ongoing Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip has risen to 25,295. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Venezuela, Attorney General Tarek William Saab offered details and testimonies on the latest conspiracies against the state unveiled and prosecuted by the security forces and the Public Prosecutor's Office. In his speech broadcast on national and international channels, the Attorney General revealed 5 moments and criminal terrorist actions that tried to bathe Venezuela in blood. He said that the captured soldiers are mercenaries from Colombia. The official indicated that the details of who pays for ammunition, weapons, air or land transfers and have clear tracks of financing are known. William added that the detainees are convicted, confessed, and have revealed information about the plans against the majority of the Venezuelan people and the democratic society.
This foreign operation operates and carries out clandestine meetings in the city of Bogotá, Republic of Colombia, for the recruitment of members of the Venezuelan state security agencies. For this plot that we have called espionage of Jagualito, 3 subjects deprived of their freedom who have already been accused by the Public Prosecutor's Office have been sentenced.
In this context, Tarek William referred to the attempts of the terrorists to leak extremely important information of the Bolivarian nation.
The subject by Paro Guerrero Lopez, who with the help of 10 other people made contacts with military personnel to extract sensitive information, classified information of military units, mobilization of aircraft and weapons, was apprehended. We lead this data. They are truly reproachable traitors, enemies of the nation and the people of Venezuela. I want to emphasize with figures already that in this case there are 11 subjects apart from those charged and accused.
Venezuela's Attorney General Tarek William also highlighted how they operated to recruit security personnel to obtain information related to presidential security.
Through intelligence work, it was determined that a group of civilians and police officers were operating in coordination with members of foreign intelligence organizations. These conspirators were operating in meetings with the purpose of recruiting members of security agencies to gain access to confidential information related to presidential security. They always have been with this obsession of assassination against the head of the state, President Nicolás Maduro. It is an obsession that keeps them awake at night and against high authorities of the state and government of Venezuela.
In this context, Venezuela's Defense Minister Chief General Padrino Lopez also warned about the objectives pursued by the destabilizing plans of the extreme right wing linked to agencies operating from abroad.
Once again, we are faced with these episodes financed from outside, planned from outside to cause pain, to spill Venezuelan blood, to continue in the empty attempt to fracture, to fragment the Venezuelan society, to go to war with each other, to civil war. Are the desperate attempts of the extreme right that is linked to foreign agencies, the United States imperialism.
Venezuelan Chief General Vladimir Padrino added that the 5 conspiratorial episodes described by the Attorney General are linked to United States agencies.
We have been listening to the 5 conspiracy episodes, and as all of them are linked to agencies such as DEA, the CIA, The Southern Command, we cannot be careless. We are with our eyes wide open. Our institutions and our counterintelligence and strategic intelligence organizations observing the whole panorama, precisely to prevent the people of Venezuela from suffering the damages of a systematic, permanent aggression against our people, against our country, against our homeland.
A delegation of senior United States government officials, including the head of the Southern Command, Laura Richardson, will visit Ecuador to accelerate bilateral cooperation in security matters. In a press release from the U.S. Embassy in Quito, it is informed that the Washington authorities will be in the South American country until next Thursday. The U.S. delegation is led by the Special Presidential Advisor for the Americas, Christopher Dodd, who is returning to Ecuador, as well as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Bureau of Counter-Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, Christopher Landberg, and other unspecified civilian and military officials. The group plans to meet with President Daniel Noboa and with his Ministers of Defense, Government, Foreign Affairs and Economy. In addition, meetings are expected with senior law enforcement and justice sectors officials and representatives of social society. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. In Colombia, the coffin carrying the remains of Senator Piedad Cordoba arrived in Bogotá, where they paid tribute to her in a funeral chapel in the Constitution Hall of the Congress. Cordoba's body was transported to Bogotá from Quibdó, where she was bid farewell by her relatives and close friends. The tributes to the outstanding activists in the Congress of the Colombian Republic will be held until 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday in the Constitutional Hall. The acts are for all public, so citizens who want to say goodbye to Senator can enter the Congress. The body of Senator Piedad Cordoba will later be taken to Medellin, her hometown, where the funeral ceremony will be held and she will receive a Christian burial. In this context, Vice President Francia Márquez paid posthumous tribute to Senator Piedad Cordoba. Márquez thanked Cordoba for the path that opened the doors of politics for Colombian women.
As Vice President, I have to say that Piedad Cordoba opened the doors for women in politics in this country, but for black women in this country. I would not be Vice President without the path that she took along with many other women and men of this nation. Thank you, Piedad, for believing in the peace of Colombia. For going into the jungles to rescue kidnapped people. Even if this country has not recognized it, I will always wonder it. Why a woman who had done such an important job has not recognized a value in this country? But now that I am here, I understand the pettiness of politics and the human pettiness that sometimes do not allow us to recognize these acts of greatness that deepen the democracy of the country like Colombia.
Likewise, the Colombian Vice President Francia Márquez thanked Piedad Cordoba once again for teaching women not to silence their voices before anyone.
Thank you for being brave, for telling the truth in the face of everyone, even if they don't like it, even to many of men and women comrades with whom she was built together with. Thank you because she taught us, black women, not to be silent, not to bow our heads. Piedad was always a woman who looked regal. And until her last days, when she was in the hospital several times, one could see her very regal because she never bowed down. Always with her elegance, always with that dignity that characterizes us as people, as women.
The Minister of Labor of Colombia, Gloria Inés Ramirez, expressed that Senator Piedad Cordoba leaves us a great example for the Colombian people.
Undoubtedly, it is a great loss for our country, for the Colombian and Latin American society, because Piedad took her causes beyond Colombia. But it must be said that she leaves us a clear example of what convictions mean, of what it means to be a true Democrat. Piedad was a democratic woman. She was a consistent woman, a woman with a high sense of libertarianism, with great convictions, but above all, with a great heart. I think that with the loss of Piedad, today the country will value what it means to truly work for the human rights, what the strength of humanitarian work means.
On the other hand, the Colombian minister highlighted the role played by Piedad Cordoba in the nation's politics throughout the years.
Well, first of all, I think what it meant to go along all the trace of this country, to look for the support of friendly and neighboring nations for this great cause, which at that time was not sufficiently understood in Colombia. This was assimilated through the internal security policy, and that was equated to terrorism. However, with the democratic conviction, with the human rights conviction, and with the conviction of a cause for freedom, Piedad gave herself to that cause. As a group of Colombians who accompanied her, we can attest to what this meant. Today we say to Colombia, this has been part of our history. Piedad was in all the necessary and priority moments of this country.
In Bolivia, President Luis Arce commemorates the 15th anniversary of the creation of the plurinational state of Bolivia with a message to the nation. From the Casa Grande del Pueblo, the seat of government, the president highlighted the union among Bolivians and urged them to maintain cooperation in a harmonious and sustainable manner for the continued development of the plurinational state. During his speech, the head of the state pointed out that the premise of the plurinational state has always been to build an inclusive, equitable society which retakes ancestral knowledge and pays permanent homage to the people's struggle to recover natural resources. Luis Arce also emphasized that the new economic model sets the country on the path of industrialization.
There are also reasons to be concerned and therefore to be alert on a combat footing. The threats of a conservative and colonial restoration project have not disappeared, and now they have in their favor the articulation with a new right wing that for personal and electoral ambition is trying to weaken the foundation of our plurinational state of Bolivia.
The president of Bolivia also denounced that from the right wing, they seek to destabilize the government and shorten the mandate if possible.
We are not going to deny that there are problems at other levels of the plurinational state, such as justice, but I want to be clear, in the plurinational legislative assembly, from where the traditional right and the new right have torpedoed the necessary consensus to call for judicial elections, and now they are trying to put the responsibility on the executive body. Nothing indicates that these political currents are interested in proving justice. In reality, they seek to use this argument of justice. They seek to use this argument of justice to destabilize the government and, if possible, even shorten our mandate.
In Palestine, the death toll of civilians from the ongoing Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip has risen to 25,295. The information was provided by the Gaza-based Health Ministry in a press statement on Monday. The institution also informed that the Israeli army had killed 190 Palestinians and wounded 340 others in 20 attacks in the past 24 hours and wounded at least 63,000 since its outbreak on October 7, 2023. On the other hand, the Hamas-run government media office said Israeli forces bombed 5 Khan Yunis shelters where 30,000 displaced people were taking refuge, killing and injuring several civilians. In the Palestinian city of Rafah, volunteers at one of the city's cemeteries are reopening old graves to find place to bury the dead amid continuous Israeli army bombardments of the southern Gaza city. At a cemetery in the east of the city, grandfather Halal Abu Hasna watched as a team of volunteers buried his slain granddaughters, niece and cousin in ancient graves, some of which date back to the 1980s. The relatives were killed early Monday when a shell hit the tent in which the family was sheltering in Khan Yunis, he said. Khan Yunis has in the recent months become one of the fronts in the conflict between Israel forces and Hamas militants in Gaza. According to cemetery volunteers, some of the largest old graves hold up to 17 corpses.
We were in our tent. A shell fell over our heads. My son's 2 daughters were martyred. My brother. But because there are plenty of martyrs of the huge disaster, we had to bury them in a mass grave.
We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break. Don't go. Welcome back to From the South. In the United States, the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, has withdrawn from the 2024 presidential race. The decision was made due to clear indications that the politician is losing to former President Donald Trump in the Republican primaries. On his social network account X, DeSantis assured the majority of Republican primary voters want to give Donald Trump another chance. DeSantis committed to support the Republican candidate. Another contender for the Republican nomination, Nikki Haley, noted that DeSantis ran a great race, has been a good governor, and wished him well, but said she does not plan to give Trump a free hand. Meanwhile, Democrats continue to resort to legal battles to attack the former president. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken begins a week-long tour of Africa's west coast with the primary objective of sustaining U.S. influence in the context of strong competition from Beijing and Moscow and an escalating instability in the Sahel region. His journey has begun with a brief stopover in Cape Verde, with subsequent destinations including Côte d'Ivoire, Nigeria and Angola. This is Blinken's first visit to sub-Saharan Africa in 10 months, in the middle of the dominant international focus on the Ukraine conflict and the Israel-Hamas conflict. Despite President Joe Biden's unfulfilled promise to visit Africa in 2023, Blinken's tour comes at a time of evolving political landscapes since his last visit to the region in March 2023.
The United States is committed to deepening, to strengthening, to broadening our partnerships across Africa, partnerships that benefit Africans and Americans alike. As President Biden has said, we are all in when it comes to Africa.
On the last day of the G77 plus China summit, leaders and heads of governments demand the transformation of the financial system and condemned the genocide against the Palestinian people. At the closing of the discussions of the integration mechanism from the city of Kampala, delegations pointed out that in order to obtain different results in terms of development, equity, protection of life and the environment, bold and different actions must be taken. The president of Uganda, who also assumes the presidency of the group, assured that many countries are trying to comply with the 2030 agenda to face the global challenges. The new leader of the G77 denounced the unfair treatment they received from countries that control the global financial sector. While awaiting a final declaration, the Cuban delegation emphasized that the group came out of Kampala united and strengthened. In this context, Uganda's head of state, Yoweri Museveni, who assumed the temporary chairman of the group of 77 plus China, questioned the demands made on developing countries while ignoring the weight of sanctions. Museveni warned that the Sustainable Development Goals target imposed on developing countries are currently unattainable. Uganda's president invited to reflect on how to fight poverty, hunger and inequality under occupation, a term he used to refer to the sanctions imposed by the United States and the World Bank. The Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Malik held meetings with several of his counterparts to reaffirm the urgency of a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The meetings were held on the sidelines of the third G77 summit in Uganda. The Palestinian Foreign Minister met with his Tunisian counterpart Nabil Amas, with whom he specifically discussed the blockade on humanitarian aid imposed by Israel. He also met with Mauro Vieira, the Brazilian Foreign Minister, and with Álvaro Leiva, the head of the Colombian diplomacy. In addition to reporting on the most recent events, he detailed the desperate situation of thousands of Palestinians in the Strip. The Foreign Minister called for a world alliance to stop the Israeli genocidal operation. The African Office of the United Nations Children's Fund has risen the alarm about a cholera outbreak affecting at least 10 countries on the continent, with a very serious situation in Zambia and Zimbabwe. Dr. Paul Wancombe, Regional Advisor for Eastern and Southern Africa, said that 200,000 cases and 3,000 deaths have been documented. The most affected countries by the outbreak are Ethiopia, Mozambique, Tanzania, Somalia, and with a very acute crisis, Zambia and Zimbabwe. Alert for the precarious hygienic conditions aggravated by the climate crisis that has produced drought and floods. Zambia and Zimbabwe are reporting an average of 1,000 cases per week per country, and the mortality rate has risen to 4%. According to the experts, it is alarmingly high. UNICEF fears that if the outbreaks are not controlled, the schools will be closed, as is already happening in Zambia. On Monday, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, Gaston Browne, arrived in Beijing for his week-long China visit, marking the first by a leader from the Latin America and the Caribbean region in 2024. The Caribbean country, a long-time China partner, supports the China proposed Belt and Road Initiative to leverage the economy and became a gateway of China cooperation in the Caribbean region. Brown's visit highlights the trend of enhanced China, Latin America and the Caribbean exchanges, which led not only to deepen mutual trust but also to extensive development opportunities. Upon his arrival, Brown told the media that he expected his China trip to further elevate bilateral relations. The Prime Minister also hailed China's role as an example to advocate peaceful coexistence and global prosperity. Brown will hold meetings with Chinese President Xi Jinping, Premier Li Qiang, and Chairman of the National People's Congress Standing Committee, Xiao Leji. We have come to the end of this news brief, and you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.